start these relationships, whoever you work for, government or industry, and got the opportunity to work with First Nation communities or companies. I mean, you need to build that relationship early, and it has to be maintained. Don't be afraid to join these community functions when they're carrying out activities out on the land. I mean, it's not all business around the table, right? To get to know someone, go golfing with them or go bang on a drum with them. It works both ways, right? So just build that relationship to start understanding, where that community's at.
Hey everyone, welcome to Your Forest. My name is Matthew Christoph, and on this podcast, we talk about the environment and the science of sustainability. Now, today's episode is all about reconciliation in forestry. In order to do that, I brought on Percy Guichon. Now, Percy is an executive director for Central Chilcotin Rehabilitation. He's also a counselor for Sidel First Nations in British Columbia, as well as a past chief. He's active on a ton of boards, all regarding, economic development and, standing up for nations. And he's got a story to tell. And his story is one of, we start talking about his past, his experience growing up in residential schools and all of the hardships that go with that, just to get a feel for, what is it that Western society is reconciling for exactly, just to try to provide that context and that perspective. It's so powerful to hear it out of his mouth, So I really appreciated his honesty, his openness, his vulnerability to tell his full story out there and just let it be known so we can learn from it. And so he came on to talk about reconciliation in the context of a company that was created in order to create some sustainable jobs, economic development, and to stand up for their values on their landscape. Yeah, so Central Chilcotin Rehabilitation is the name of one of the organizations, also Sidel Enterprises. And he just came on to explain how these organizations were created, how they were merged, how they started to build relationships with Western society, with industry, with government, and how difficult that was, but how they were able to do it, and kind of gives a bit of a template for how other First Nations communities, Indigenous communities might be able to accomplish something similar. And it was just a great conversation, like really talking about the ability of First Nations people, Indigenous people to lead in this forest management landscape. This is a story about how a few First Nations communities were able to build something out of the hardships of their past and to try and share that story with other people, and also hopefully promote people outside of Indigenous communities to take their power and use it to help Indigenous communities in whatever way it might be. So, sponsors for Your Forest for 2024, Wes Fraser is the number one sponsor. They've been with me almost since the very, very beginning, and I couldn't do this without them. And it's just been so nice having their support. So I really appreciate Wes Fraser for everything they've done. Also, Greenlink Forestry has been with me since the very beginning, and I couldn't do this without them. Thank you, Greenlink. Now, without any further messing around, let's dive into this conversation with Percy, all about reconciliation in forestry. Here we go. Yeah, thanks a lot, Percy, for taking the time to do this. I appreciate you making the time, because I'm excited to have this conversation, for sure. Okay. I guess normally I just first start off getting to know yourself, right? Getting to know my guests. So if you could just introduce yourself and tell us a little about yourself, a little bit about your nation, then we can dive into the purpose of today.
Okay, sure. My name is Percy Guichon. I am a Tidal First Nation member and also elected a council member. Been working for my nation on and off for 24 years, I believe, as a council member. as a employee in their economic development department.
Mm-hmm.
Started with my community back in 1986. Back in the day, seems like a long, long time ago.
Oh, yeah.
And then we've come a long way since then. But yeah, I was born and raised mostly out in the little territory. I grew up very isolated area and raised by a single mother and my aunt who both couldn't speak English.
Okay,
And
okay.
so I didn't learn to speak English myself until I was 5 years old because
Wow.
I had to go to school and grade one. So my older sister helped with that.
Yeah.
So my English isn't too bad now.
Yeah, that sounds great. That's a
But I
practice.
still, one of the lucky ones in my generation, anyways, to be able to still speak, Tsaikotin language. So, pretty proud of that and pretty grateful, to having been raised by my mom and my aunt, both who have passed, and my uncles and other aunts, right, to be able to carry, that language on. So yeah, it's a little community. It's a very fairly small community of probably about 350 members, 2 hours west of Williams Lake, interior of BC. We have an overall band membership of probably about 750 people, but a lot of members live in other areas. Majority in Williams Lake, just more opportunities, schooling, and things like that, right? So,
Yep.
and limited housing. We're slowly getting there, and
Okay.
in building more homes in our community. Our community's been, has come a long way since I first started in 1986. Moved away for a bit back in 97, I believe. I moved away for 13 years, to go back to school. I'm a forest tech. I went back to school later in life, but,
Right.
was able to get that done. And I worked in other areas of the province for 13 years. Also, after my truck career ended, I also worked with the First Nation group out of Fort St. John, the Treaty 8 Tribal Association. So kind of put my schooling, back to use. And I was the referral coordinator for their 5 communities up in that northeast BC. So yeah, a good range of experience. And then, I helped establishment of our joint venture logging company, Sidalal Enterprises Limited, which, we've had 3 partners. Current partner is Tolko Industries. We started out with Jacobson Brothers, family-owned company in Williams Lake, and then they were bought out by Riverside, and then Riverside was bought out by Tolko. So, the common denominator there is Tidal First Nation. Our community never gets bought or traded or moved, right? So, we always we don't have that option.
You're still there. Yeah, no kidding, right? Yeah. That was something interesting I found in those teaser videos you guys are saying too, right? You're like, companies come and go, but the community is always here no matter what, right? And so we have to find a way to live in this area regardless of what's going on. Yeah. No, that was a strong sentiment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I don't know, some other interesting facts about myself. I guess after I went to school, my late mom, she was a rancher. A lot of First Nations back in those days were ranchers. Everybody had their plot of land and Indian reserves, IR lands they call them. And every family had a little plot of land, and they worked hard in raising cattle and horses and livestock, putting up hay, things like that. But so when it was my turn to go to school, my mom sort of sold everything and then moved to the nearest community of Puntsy, where there was an elementary school, and then spent a year there at grade 1, and then we were forced to go to residential school in Williams Lake. My grade 2, 3, and 4. So it was devastating for my mom, but I guess that's how things were back then. And just to finish off, there was an election coming up in 2010. I heard that our logging company that I helped build, Tidal Enterprises, was considering closing its doors. They went through some rough times through the downturn in forestry and things like that. And that was one of the reasons I ran for chief back in that day. And among other things, obviously, I want to, bring all my learnings and education back to the community to help the community and the members. But I was successful in getting elected as chief. So I was there as chief for 6 years, sorry, and really great experience. And I got to give my hats off to the chiefs of Canada. That it's a lot of work. It's a full-time job, and and then I decided to stop at 6 years and more interested in helping my people through forestry and economic development. So, but I'm still on council. I still have one foot in the door in the politics end of things, which I do enjoy, and I feel that I have a lot of knowledge and experience to help our community. So, absolutely. And then I was working with Tidal Enterprises after my chieftainship, and then we decided, start this company called Central Code Rehabilitation, CCR, and then so I've been with CCR as a board of director, and then just last year and a half as an executive director of CCR, and continue to sit on the board of Tidal Enterprise, along with other economic development corporation boards as well. So, yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, Percy, you're a mover and a shaker. Hey, just like you got jumping around and getting things done and trying to change everything. Right? It's awesome. I love that. That's really, really cool. Yeah, a lot of experience to go back onto, and lots of that's awesome. I love it.
And I still have my class 1 if I ever need to fall back on it.
yeah, right. We always need to drive truck, right? Yeah. So, like you spoke, obviously previously, up until you were 5 years old, you didn't even speak English, right? So, I'm going to make the assumption that you lived a fairly traditional lifestyle in the sense that was your surroundings, you're inundated in it. I want to know at that time, what is your first memory of the concept of taking care of land, and when that. Maybe there's a moment that really took root in your mind where you started taking care of land and taking care of community and the balance of all that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, we always, just the early memories, always growing up on the land, always living on the land, following the animals, following the fish, and camping out all summer. That was just a regular thing we did back then. And riding horses and riding around in wagons, because my mom, didn't know English and never did have a driver's license in her life. So we always, remember our, childhood memories of helping make hay and stuff like that, right? With helping the aunts and uncles and our neighbors, and, all the kids participating, putting up hay for the winter for, the cattle and horses. I think really got interested in forestry. I was in high school in Williams Lake, actually, and where they had what do you call that, work experience programs, right?
Oh yeah,
and I was down at the tire shop, for about a week one time, or a couple of weeks, whatever that was. Tire, changing tires, right? That wasn't really my thing. Experience. But this one time I went out with a fellow. It was in forestry, and we were doing some silviculture surveys on a burnt area just outside of Williams Lake here. So that really caught my interest. And I said, yeah, one day, I'm going to be involved in forestry. And sure enough, when I moved back out home there, definitely, when I got into on council and got into economic development, that was, back in those days, a lot of these First Nation communities out west here, specifically Tsilhqot'in communities I'm speaking about. There's a lot of summer seasonal jobs around forestry, whether it was, tree spacing, mistletoe eradication, carrying chainsaws and out on the cut blocks and things like that. But so I got into that business too on behalf of the band, and used to look after tree spacing contracts, looked after tree planting contracts, and we weren't really involved in harvesting of trees. I mean, there was people that were employed in that industry, but so back in the late 80s, I guess, chief at the time was Chief Irvin Charlie Boy. And, we're seeing all these logging trucks go through our communities because we, IR number 1, where the main community is now, the highway runs down the middle of the reserve. And seeing all these logging trucks go by, and people were, I think, getting frustrated with industry and that they were harvesting in our territories without our inclusion and
right.
our say in where the harvesting takes place and things like that. And
yeah.
the community was in a bit of an uproar. I think at one point they had enough and said, "Okay, we're going to roadblock these guys and stop the logging trucks." Right?
Yeah. Fair.
And then Chief Irvin, he has some wisdom. He's been chief for a long time. So I said, well, how about if we sit down with them and let's not, roadblock them. Let's ask to join them. So that's how these discussions around a joint venture with Jacobson Brothers Mills at the time got started. And we sat around the table. There was a lot of, heated discussions initially, but, it takes time to, develop that relationship where we can trust one another and be able to hammer out issues, at the table and speak frankly and, by having respect and that trust. So I was involved in a bit of horse logging. So,
nice.
Working for the band and trying out something to do. But, at a small scale, it's hard work. Most people do it just for a hobby, right? So it's not going to employ a lot of people. So with that little bit of background and being involved in discussions with around a joint venture, that really I really enjoyed that, and we felt that we're making a difference being involved in the harvesting in our territory, and then so that really took off. I mean, we started with, I think we had 2 buckermans, we had a skitterman, and a feller buncher, 4 or 5 guys,
Yeah.
and started really small. I mean, it was all new to us, and eventually we were able to grow that company.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can only imagine how challenging it must be to be in community and to see a Western company pulling logs out of your traditional territory and all that kind of thing, and then the foresight to be like, well, this is going to happen. How do we contribute to this and help steer it in the right direction that we're comfortable with and we're happy with and is good for community? And that's huge. And then to go even further, the sentiment you said around the difficulty at first in creating that trust and that relationship, and that I can't even imagine, two very different cultures, and one with a lot of power and one with just wanting to stand up for itself. And that's the continued story of reconciliation, right?
Yeah, you bet. I mean, back in those days, joint ventures weren't really, you hear a lot about it now. Back in those days, it was, it was a rarity almost, right? First Nations joint venturing with a major mill company, But, Side Love First Nation likes to, make the track in the snow, right? So
that's awesome. I love that. Very cool. Yeah, no, it's huge. And I think that's what we're here for today, right? We're going to talk about reconciliation in forestry, and we're going to talk about the unique ways that you and your organization, your community have gone through that, right? And I think it can paint an interesting picture and maybe a pathway for other communities to do something similar, or just get the conversation started in a unique way, right? So, one thing I want to make sure we do before we get into the nitty gritty of everything is I think if we're going to talk reconciliation in forestry, we kind of need to talk about what we're reconciling for. And obviously people know to some degree, but you just never know what people do and don't know. And, the history of First Nations and Indigenous people in Canada and what they've been through and all that kind of stuff. So I thought it would be good to spend a few minutes talking about that history in whatever format you want to talk about it.
Sure.
Just to provide that context for people so we understand the necessity of reconciliation and make sure, we paint that picture,
Sure. I mean, there's been a lot of reconciliation work happening in Canada, in all areas, everything from, justice to children and families, education, economic opportunities, in all aspects of, the life of a community. And, there's been a lot of great work, reconciliation efforts on past harms and acknowledging those, things like residential school, right, which was it's an important part of our history. It didn't really go well for the First Nations, but it is nonetheless our history.
Yeah,
we're creating new history, a better history for our people. But I think the start of reconciliation is just by acknowledging those past harms and what it did to our people. And I was one of the lucky ones. I managed to go back home and almost lost my language, but I managed to retain it. My brothers one of my younger brothers that went to residential school, he stayed there longer than I have, and he kind of lost it, right? So, so that's without language, I mean that's a big part of your culture, but lots of other harms that related to that, families being, having kids, yanked away from them, without any say, and so it created a lot of social issues, for those families, turning to alcohol, for example, to deal with their, that trauma, right? So, and then that, then that became generational trauma, right? That we're having to deal with. There's, I can go on all day about this, but
I believe that.
The racism back in the day, the lack of jobs, the lack of opportunity for education, the lack of just not having the same equitable opportunities, I guess, in all aspects of life, and that. Almost having, losing our culture because, alcohol was a big thing in our communities, which was very, detrimental. Alcohol, is related to all these other issues, ministry coming in and taking our kids away, for example. Acknowledging that, and, nowadays we're working with the governments, we're working with, there's a lot of great things happening where, developing our own children and family entities, where we're kind of taking over those programs, to be able to look after our own children just in our community. Just recently, for example, we purchased a home just down the highway, from our community and created a safe house, for example. Instead of kids that maybe potentially are at risk, they don't have to be moved into Williams Lake, which is a 2-hour drive. And we have a safe house that are staffed by our own members. They're able to continue to go to school while we help the families figure things out and reduce that risk for our children, right? So I see things have really improved, and that's, and that we're still a ways away, mind you, but I see things going in the right direction in that regard, but we still have some of the highest, craziest stats in terms of justice, right? A lot of our people incarcerated,
Yeah.
For example, and still working on those types of issues. But I think it's about working together, with government, with the public, with whoever wants to listen, to our story, and just talking about it, acknowledging it, and bringing solutions and coming up with solutions together with the rest of Canada. I mean, that's very important. We need the support of the rest of Canada, and just understanding, what we've gone through, what barriers are in front of us, and we're just like any other people, right? We want an opportunity. We want to contribute to society in a good way, and Canada has really, I think, stepped up to the plate and providing resources to be able to help ourselves, empower communities, and build back that pride, bring back traditions, bring back culture, and you can see that across Canada. It's really gathering steam, and on top of that, creating meaningful long-term employment, whether it's in harvesting or having kids go to school and being nurses and doctors and people working in trades. I mean, everybody wants to work. Everybody wants to be self-sufficient. Everybody wants to contribute and give their kids a good life, right? So
be proud of themselves.
And it's just about communities building their own destiny, right? And and managing our own affairs, and but we still do need help. We still rely on the provincial and federal governments for the funding to help help fund our schools, for example, our health centers, and just another municipality, right?
Yeah, just like every other community in Canada. Yeah,
exactly. So, and then now, nowadays I've really seen in terms of reconciliation in forestry, it's really, the last 5 years, it's been it's been pretty amazing to watch, the governments and the industry step up and recognize, that communities have a big role to play, and that they want to be involved in what happens in their territories, and want to have a say on how all resources are managed, and whether it's fisheries or wildlife or forestry.
Yeah.
I've seen it. I've seen the difference. I've seen the changes. We're just not involved in carry around chainsaws. That we're some people like doing that.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. And some people are happy with that. But we also, being able to form companies, forestry companies, a lot of communities. The last 5 years I've seen in the Sault-Côte area, they've developed their own development corporations, for example, and seeing the changes there, and participating in the local economy. It's made a world of difference, I think, for all the First Nation communities that are able to contribute and create jobs and maintain those jobs. And it's not just a seasonal job, work from June to September and then go on EI, right? Families, inflation, and everything else nowadays, you can't survive on EI.
No.
There's got to be more than that, right? So, it's just working with the Ministry of Forests, for example, I seen a lot of reconciliation work there.
Yeah.
Whereas, we would always be, I think maybe left out on forestry contract opportunities. Now we're sitting down at these tables on a regular basis with the local forest district, for example, and seeing what the opportunities are. And some of these opportunities are awarded directly to our forest companies, which continue to support the community. You support the community, you support the families that rely on these jobs, and you're creating much healthier communities as well. And then, we also definitely help our non-First Nation communities in a lot of ways, and improving on those relationships. And that's all part of reconciliation, right? Just better understanding one another. And,
Yeah.
and because, we've got to be neighbors. We're going to live
Yeah.
side by side for many years to come and generations to come. So let's just acknowledge that and see how we can, work together and making a better future for all our kids. Right.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that concept of a working relationship, and I'm sure it's not easy to build, like you said. I'm sure it's an uphill battle, and I'm sure every nation has a different situation they're dealing with, and ups and downs and goods and bads, but it's incredible to hear that, hear you say those things, right? That you're seeing movement on that front, and you're seeing real change, at least in your nation and the ones around you, and that's enormous. And this is taking a step back a little bit, and it might be asking you for a little bit too much personal information. And if that's the case, just say I don't want to talk about it, and we'll move on. But I think something that I've had a few conversations about reconciliation on here, like with Gary Merkel and some other people. But one thing I've realized that I've never been able to have anybody describe, trying to put into context the huge cultural shift that it would have been for someone like yourself who went from living a more or less traditional lifestyle in community, and then all of a sudden being pulled from community and getting put into a residential school and now having to learn English and not knowing any of the cultural taboos or anything like that. And I realized you were 5 years old, so it's probably maybe hard to remember, but I can you maybe describe for the listeners, just to provide that context of how much of a shock that must have been, to try and provide context for or perspective, I should say, for how challenging it must be. So how for what it was like for you.
Yeah, it was very difficult.
Yeah.
Wildly, yeah. It was so I went to school at Puncy Mountain for grade 1, so I was 6 back in the day, I think, and then I went to residential school when I was 7, along with lots of other, my brother and other little cousins, that were younger than me. And when you first arrive at a residential school, it's quite intimidating. It's just like this big, huge 4-story building in the middle of nowhere. Well, It was just outside of Williams Lake, but you're a kid. It seemed like it seemed like a prison in the distance. I'm like, why are we going here?
Wow.
Why can't we stay with my mom? I was going to school. Why are you bringing me here?
Yeah.
And you're mad at your parents, but they had no say.
Right.
We're all separated. There's, the girls on one side, the boys on one side, and, you had like the juniors and the intermediate and the seniors on one side, and, you're given 3 squares a day, and then you were all shipped out. Anyways, you're all shipped out to various schools at Williams Lake.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't get that. But, one of the, I've mentioned it before, but I was 7 years old, and as soon as you got off that bus, my job was to protect my brother. My job was to protect my little siblings or little cousins, right? And this is a crazy thing. So as soon as I got off that bus, I realized, that you have to be tough. Have to be tough for my brother, have to be tough for my cousins, so nobody hurts them, whether it's, whoever.
Yeah. Right.
And this may sound crazy, but immediately, figured out there's a pecking order, and you had to fight.
Oh,
in order to work up the pecking order. This is 7 years old. This is like jail stuff,
It's wild.
And so the further you got up the pecking order, nobody would, they would keep my brother safe and then my little cousin safe, right? Because they knew I was high up in the order.
That's wild.
You had to fight your way up that order,
7-year-olds.
You had to fight kids in a different category that were older than you to prove yourself. Right? That was one thing. Back then I didn't really think about it. That was just what I had to do to protect my family.
Survival mode.
It was survival mode. That's what it was. And when I think back about it, I'm like, man, that's just nuts,
That's insane.
I mean, I don't know if you have children, but
I do,
if your kid went to residential school at 7, and then they're talking about fighting to get up the pecking order.
Yeah, like what the hell? Like I
So,
know it's yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I went to school. Yeah, I went to school every day, and I learned Western education, and I enjoy learning.
Sure.
So that was good for me. But everything else besides that, I learned how to play hockey.
Okay. Yeah.
But when you think about the impacts to my family, my late mom, and I was the oldest son, got yanked away from her. I mean, the impacts on her and how it devastated her, and all these other families, they felt that they weren't a good parent.
Right.
They were disheartened. They were lost. You always feel, why did you send me here?
Right.
What am I doing here?
Right. Resentment and yeah.
So resentment, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I was always happy to go home at Christmas, right?
Oh.
But it just almost a loss of language, because I was around it every day with my mother and my aunts and uncles, and I almost lost it. And
That's wild.
and your culture and your traditions, and just a sense of who you are.
Yeah.
I think and it took a while to get that back, and yeah, it was a pretty tough time, I guess, in my little young life.
Right. No kidding.
And it really, some people, friends of mine, are still having to deal with that trauma. And I drive to work, and I still see it. Some of my friends I went to residential school with, they're on the streets.
Yeah.
They're heavily addicted to alcohol, to drugs, and I'm grateful for where I am and having to overcome that trauma in my life. But I see a lot of friends that are struggling, to this day.
No, yeah, and I imagine it's probably it would be so justified and easy to just become angry at the world for putting you through that.
Yeah, I mean, you went through that stage too. You were not happy. You were, why has everyone been racist to me? What have I done wrong? And you rebel, right?
Yeah. I can't even imagine.
I've gone through that sage. So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it came through. But yeah, and to think that the fact that that you only saw your parents 2 months a year for how many years?
Yeah, for summer, you come home for summer, obviously, and then Christmas and Easter, I think we came home.
And Christmas and Easter, you're like, what the hell's Christmas and Easter?
And then, yeah, and then being, the residential school was operated by Catholics, right? So,
of course, yeah.
It was something that I had to get used to, right? And I mean, I'm baptized a Catholic, but unfortunately not a practicing one. But it left me with a lot of scars.
Oh, I can't even imagine
the whole church system. So
yeah.
I pray my own way, and I pray to Creator, right? Things like that, right? So I have a different belief.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Percy. I really appreciate you diving into that. That's got to be tough to reminisce on those things and to think about all those hardships, but yeah, I appreciate you doing that for us, because I think it helps myself, it helps everyone else kind of contextualize those challenges in some way, right? And it's I'm sorry you had to go through all that, but I'm glad you're here today to tell us about it. So appreciate it.
Yeah, and I was there for 3 years. I mean, my younger brother was there for 10 years.
So yeah, that's a lot.
And there's a lot of people that have been there for a long time, and I had one uncle that went to that school, and they had it much harder. I mean, they were basically there to, help in the garden and free labor, child labor, I guess. And by the time my uncle said he wanted to finish school, he wanted to go to school. Now that he learned to read, and he was happy. He was grateful that he learned to read. But as soon as you aged, it's as soon as the cost of that, right, is enormous.
Yeah.
And you still see the remnants of that in our communities, right? Just generational trauma. But
absolutely. Well, thank you for that, Percy. I really appreciate it. It puts a good it allows us to a little step into your life for a moment and try to understand where you're coming from. And I think it's invaluable for us to be able to hear that from you. So thank you.
Okay.
And so I want to dive back into this. Now that we've talked about the horrible shit that happened to you,
it made me who I am, though, right?
Right. That's one way to look at it, right? That's not everyone's able to do that. I can't imagine the challenges. I've never been through anything even a tenth as difficult as what you went through. So speaking to all that, and so that's what we need to reconcile for, is all that, plus everything that happened before and after and everything else. And so we're trying to figure that out. And your community has figured out one way towards building resilient community, building reconciliation, having your say on the landscape around you. And you've done it in a really unique way, and you've been fortunate enough to be able to pull it off, and it's great. So let's dive into today, like the current the current day. We've already discussed the how a CCR came to be, Central Chilcotin Rehabilitation. So you also discussed a bit about why that came about, right? Like just to try to provide some opportunities for community, and the chief had the foresight to push that, and so I want to ask you about Central Chilcotin Rehabilitation. Why rehabilitation? Why was that the name you guys went for, and why was that the purpose of this?
Yeah, Central Chilcotin Rehabilitation. It was a former Chief Irvin, actually, who helped start the joint venture with Tidal Enterprise. We're sitting around a table, with our partners, the Cook government, and we heard about this program called Forest Enhancement Society BC.
Okay,
and they were funding forestry initiatives around BC. It was a new source of funding, and then we said, "Hey, let's have a look at this." And so we actually invited the government, the local forestry district, to the table, and said, "Hey, there's this new funding source that's out, and how can we work on it and collaborate and get some projects going out in the Chilcotin?" And so that's, and then they were open to working with us
that's great
on this, and supporting us. So said, well, we got support there locally, and so let's look at starting a company. And so we got around the table, and then so Irvin Charlie Boy, he says, we're looking at names, and he's the one that suggested, well, we're kind of in the central Chilcotin, so how about Central Chilcotin Rehabilitation?
Okay.
And the rehabilitation part, we talked a lot about. Initially, it was to address forest stands impacted by the mountain pine beetle and other insects. And that was our focus. So there's still a lot of 1,000 hectares of areas in the Chilcotin territory where they're infested with mountain pine beetle. They've been dead for a long time. There's mistletoe in there. It's falling down. It has low value for, the major mills. And we just wanted to rehabilitate these areas and get a new forest, more resilient forest up and growing. So that's kind of how a CCR started. And then, those discussions were happening back in probably the fall of 2016.
Okay.
And then, 2017, wow, all hell broke loose in terms of these mega wildfires we've never ever heard of before, right? And Williams Lake being evacuated, over 800,000 hectares burned in the Hansville Plateau fire. So after that, we had to do a little bit of adjustment of our of CCR and what projects we wanted to take on.
Yeah.
So we started focusing on the rehabilitation of burnt stands and try to salvage areas, specifically fir stands that still had a lot of value for saw logs, and definitely in fir stands, a lot of areas were torched, so a lot of the cone trees were burnt as well. So those areas needed help, and so replanting those areas, right? So that's kind of where CCR started, and you're always changing. You're always trying to do better things for the forest, trying to be innovative, trying to come up with new ideas. You're managing for wildlife and trying to establish these areas so wildlife has something to browse on, and because our moose population was down. I don't know how many animals we lost into the forest through these forest fires. I don't think there's any data on that. So because a lot of our people are still rely on moose and deer, for example, and the salmon, for their sustenance needs, and so we were always, CCR is always evolving. We got into utilizing some of this burnt fiber, utilizing slash piles.
Oh wow! Okay.
And instead of burning these slash piles, we started a biomass company, and because we saw a market, with the local mills. Williams Lake is probably one of the only little towns that they have a pellet plant. It used to be Pinnacle, now it's Drax. They have a power plant that, and then they also have 3 or 4 sawmills. Yep. And we're located, sort of near in between Kamloops and Prince George, where there's pulp mills, right? So we started, not just harvesting trees and salvaging, but also trying to utilize, the fiber in these slash piles. And, which also created more jobs. Biomass, I think when we started, it created about 45 jobs that we still sustain today. That's not including all the jobs that are sustained at the pellet plant and the power plant and at the pulp mills, right? Yeah. And the trucks, of course, that haul the fiber to market. But, continue to diversify, because we know there's going to be a blip in our timber supply. There's going to be a review here in the next couple of years in Williams Lake, and the level of cut is going to drop, and it needs to be dropped. We've been saying it should have dropped a long time ago, because that there was an increase due to over 25 years ago due to the mountain pine beetle epidemic, right? And where their levels of cut shot right up, and
trying to cut all the pine before the pine beetle get it. Yeah,
exactly. But I think we're the only one of the few logging companies that still are harvesting mountain pine beetle. That's been impacted for over 25 years. That the Chilcotin pine, it's pretty resilient. It stands up for a long time, and we're still harvesting that. We still feel we need to do the right thing to do is continue to clean up these mountain pine beetle infested areas, so we can continue to salvage those areas, but also to reduce the wildfire risk, and have more areas burned, right? So one of the few that still cuts dead wood,
right?
Dead pine.
I can't. Yeah, I think for large forest companies, it's probably easy to go, well, that's no good anymore. Let's go over here. And you guys are kind of stuck in the middle with what's around town, right? And you got to deal with I remember watching, you guys had several promotional videos out that I watched prior to this, and talking about how we kind of got given the the bottom of the barrel of like profit wise anyways, right, economically speaking. And,
Yes.
you're kind of forced to innovate and be creative and to make something out of this. And that's an incredible part of this story for this community, is the ability to see opportunities and that no one else is seeing and take advantage, right?
So that's a good point. A lot of the the logging companies that are long gone now, they did have their pick of the cream of the crop, right? Where they were getting double figures in terms of return, right? And and then a lot of our forest licenses weren't implemented until they were gone, and we harvesting the bottom of the barrel, so to speak, and making single digit returns, right? Because smaller wood, smaller diameter wood, you have to cover a lot of ground. That's why Side Little Enterprise probably has one of the largest fleet of processors anywhere.
Wow.
In terms of the volume that we harvest. I mean, we've probably got about a dozen processors, because the wood is so small.
Yeah,
you've got to process a lot of wood to make sure the chucks are full.
Yeah,
and so a lot more equipment, a lot more manpower, and in today's market, the prices of these equipment.
Yeah,
bunchers, processors, skidders, they've gone through the roof.
Yeah,
and our logging rate,
the same.
It's the same.
Isn't that wild?
You try to pay off a piece of equipment, brand new equipment, within 5 years, and I don't know how we do it. We've got a good team, and and we continue to get single digit returns. And but we do employ a lot of people in being able to support other programs, such as social programs, for example.
Yeah.
But just ensuring that communities continue to be healthier and safer and communities.
I love that. Yeah, I think that, and the foresight to notice that, because I think you guys picked up on biomass as a economic opportunity when it was still considered an unknown, right? It was like, maybe, I don't know, we've tried some things, it hasn't worked out, and no one was really confident that it was going to be economical to pull chips from the cut blocks and make fuel out of them. But you guys have managed to pull it off, so you're a testimonial to that, right? That this is doable. You just have to be smart about it, efficient, and I think it helps that that's home for you guys, right? That's home, and you're like, this is land, we're taking care of it, we're doing what we can to make sure that this is sustainable forever, right? So that's a huge thing. And I think one thing I kept thinking about when I was watching your videos and reading the articles and stuff is one thing that everyone kept hitting on was the importance for you guys and for the province, for Canada, even for Indigenous-led forest management in a lot of ways, right? And I wanted to know why you think that the leading is the important part, right? So not just being involved, not just being, given the cookie of, you can cut some of our trees for us, but the actually being at the table when decisions are made and leading the way.
Yeah.
Why is that the important role? Why is that different than just getting a piece of the pie, do you think?
Yeah, it's very important for First Nation communities to take the lead in these, being involved in the forest industry, for too long. A lot of communities, unfortunately, those that don't have the capacity still, have the mills, for example, come in and harvest their, their trees, but they get a small token in terms of, revenue sharing per cubic meter, right? So, if you're going that route, you're not really developing your capacity, and you're not having a say in I mean, I imagine they do, but less of a say, I should say, the management of the forest resource, and for the longest time, the provincial government and the major mills in Williams Lake have taken that lead role. They would drop off, knock on your door to ban off office and then give you a 5-year development plan. This is where we're going to log and comment within 30 days. And see you later. See you in 5 years.
Not a lot of opportunity for contribution.
That process is long gone.
Yeah, thank God.
So we, we need to be part of leading. Co-management always comes up too, and I think that's a little easier for for the government, right?
A little bit easier to swallow for Western.
But in terms of projects that CCR takes on, we are leading, and with the help of industry, with the help of the local forest district, right? And these other funding agencies like the FESBC and the NRCan 2 billion tree program. We still need them.
Right.
To carry out these large-scale forestry projects. We need to invest in these. We've had thousands of hectares burned in our territory. We've got to help these forests come back.
Yeah.
And have something for the future generations of, all future generations, to be able to benefit from and enjoy and be long gone. But, at least you're developing that legacy, I guess, for our future kids to manage.
Yeah.
And, definitely First Nation led. I mean, we believe in, long term, we're not just going in and harvesting under our licenses and then, walk away at free to grow stage and say, see you later, trees. We're in it for the long term. We want to continue to manage these forests, the future, benefit. And, I think that's the big difference. And not just looking at the trees, because they're potential 2x4, right?
Right. What's the other values?
What are the other values? And, we have to incorporate that and, plan for other values. So, that's important. Like we talked about earlier, the communities can't be bought, sold, or traded.
Yeah.
So
they're there
we
forever.
have to manage our backyards for future generations. And I think that's the big difference.
Totally. That makes sense.
And, I mean, it's the right time for us, to be in this situation, I believe, because, there's a lot of good things happening in terms of, you hear in the news about some of the major mill companies, forest companies transferring their forest licenses to communities. I mean, that's great because, I have a good relationship with a lot of people at the forest companies, mills around town here. They don't want to do the managing, and planning and of the forest resource. Sure. They just want the fiber.
Okay.
Right?
Yep. Okay.
They just wanted a fiber agreement. You can take that work on.
So the Woodlands Department.
Exactly. So that's what basically kind of CCR is, kind of a Woodlands Department, but it's more than that. That's part of it.
Yes.
We're forest. We kind of think of CCR as a forest management company. So it encompasses all areas, and we're really active in other resource too, looking after our salmon and our fish in our major rivers and streams. So working with, for example, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans on the Chilko Lake, we have one of the largest consistent runs in BC. So we, our tribal council, Tsilhqot'in National Government has really come a long ways in terms of building that relationship with DFO over a number of years, and then making sure that, these numbers are maintained in terms of, the fish coming back to spawn and things like that. I mean, once they're in the ocean, they're kind of, out of our hands, but we want to ensure that, they have a good chance of survival. So, wildlife, for example, we're heavily involved in that. There's a wildlife panel that consists of the Tsilhqot'in nations and the local Ministry of Forests and Environment and Walrus, those types of groups, and working on things together. Like, for example, the moose populations were down, and working together and trying to come up with solutions on how we can obviously stop hunting cow moose. We got signs everywhere up here.
Sure.
And making sure people respect that, and even our own people respect that, right? Because we need our moose populations to come back for sure.
That makes sense.
A lot of different initiatives like that where it's gaining ground and traction, and enabling communities to really have a say in what happens in their backyards, and having a say that's acknowledged, and that's building on these agreements. And we have guardians now,
Oh yeah. Oh, right. Yes.
that we have out west. I mean, we want more of them, and so they kind of patrol the land, and making sure everybody's behaving, and not shooting the cow moose. Because we recognize that the conservation officers, they're understaffed. Some of these conservation officers have a huge territory to cover, so we can fill those gaps. We have people out there.
Yep.
And so work goes both ways, right?
I love that.
So we're helping them with their resourcing needs too, right? So
I love that.
We're doing our own collaring, for example. We still have to get approval from the provincial governments, but
sure.
we're doing our own bear collaring and getting those baseline studies going, because the ministry sometimes they have a lack of resources in hiring people or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. And we're trying to fill those gaps.
Yeah. I love that. Like it's fascinating to hear the niche that you've carved out for yourselves, right? That you're tying all these threads together to make sure that this concept, the thing I always talk about on this show, right, is I'm always trying to talk about the ultimate in sustainability. We're talking about all of the values, right? Bringing all those values together and manage them as co-values. How do we balance that equation so that over time, these forests aren't shifting and changing in negative ways, right? And that we're promoting the continuation of everything. And you guys are managing to do that through cooperation and through the hard work of building good relationships and having the hard conversations, I can imagine. Yeah. And I think it's an incredible accomplishment to have been able to do what you guys have done. And I think to that, I would like to dive into a little bit the mindset that was required for you as a First Nations organization to be able to go to organizations or government or whoever it might be, Western society in general, create those relationships and have the hard conversations, right? So like, what was it? Because I can't imagine it's probably really easy to get deterred and because you probably run into barriers all the time trying to do that. So I want to know how you're able to do that. What was the mindset? What kind of I can't imagine the patience required and the fortitude required to just be like, okay, we're going to keep hammering on this until we can get this relationship worked out.
Yeah, it's taken a long time.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And
it's not an overnight thing.
There's been a lot of how would you say? I don't know, a foundation built. Some of that foundation my community has to build, and some of the foundation is built by our St. Cote national government. That's operated by all of the 6 chiefs are directors at that nation level. Okay. And working in unity. We're not all the same communities. We're all different.
You have different needs.
We have a different paths, right?
Sure.
Some don't want to have forestry or logging in their territories.
Okay.
And with us, we do. That's the path we've been on for a while.
Yeah.
But we're all trying to get to the same end goal.
Yeah.
We want our people to be healthy. We want our people to have jobs. We want our people to, our communities to be self-reliant. All that good stuff. It's just a different path.
I love that.
But, one of the major relationship building exercises has been with the provincial and federal government, which laid a lot of these foundations out for us. With the, the title case, for example, the St. Cote title case, that started, by the way, 35 years ago, maybe.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It all that court case started because the Honeyguatine, our neighbors to the south, didn't want logging in their territory, and they set up a roadblock, and then went to court from there. And there was other things attached to it. That was a 25-year process, I think.
Mm.
Tried to negotiate, and that didn't work. I mean, a lot of it is this, when I moved away, and then and when I came back as chief in 2010 to help my community, they were heavy into that process. My aunt that I spoke about, who helped raise me, she was, one of the star witnesses, in that court case. And, it was our elders' oral history that brought it over the goal line, right? And
really? That's really interesting.
Yeah. And then 2014, July 26, I believe, or June 26. We're having a 10-year anniversary here next month.
Nice.
And anyways,
awesome.
So I was in Vancouver. I was chief at the time. We're at the Union of BC Indian Chiefs office there at 6 a.m. I think it was, because they were making a decision in Ottawa. And we did go to Ottawa as chiefs, and we also sent some of the elders. Some of the elders came along with us. They actually boarded a bus, and they went through all the provinces to Ontario and stopped and gathering support. And and they were able to join us. I mean, not everybody was in court when they were given their, I think, their final arguments. But interesting story. Sorry.
No, I love it. I love it.
So the elders, they're a lot of them are traditional. They make their own dresses and things like that, right? And they were going through screening, right? Metal detector or whatever. All these elders, I can't remember how many of them, maybe 20 of them. They all had knives. They'll pocket them.
Right, yeah.
So the security guys, he ended up getting a bucket, and they're all putting their knives in them. And he goes, why do they all have knives?
Right.
Well, you never know when you come across a moose and you have to skin some, right?
Yeah, you never know. Downtown Ottawa, there might be a moose. Yeah.
So that was a funny story. So back in June 2014, the decision came down for the Tsilhqot'in title and rights case. The judges voted 8-0 in favor of Tsilhqot'in people.
Wow, that's a huge shift in.
That was monumental, big celebration.
Yeah, no kidding.
And it was monumental for not just, Tsilhqot'in people, but First Nations across Canada. It was a monumental shift. Right soon after that, our people are so happy that we're finally acknowledged and getting, rights to a tidal area, which is the only tidal area in Canada. And, we're, 1,800 square kilometers of territory in the heart of our territory that we are responsible for. But it took a long time to get there. Ever since I was a child, and my aunt Patricia always taught me, one of the first things that you were taught as a Chilcotin child, when you were able to comprehend, is Chilcotin War of 1864. Okay. Where I don't know if you know that story, but there was, people were racing to the gold fields up in Barkerville, and our chiefs back in the day, they were smart enough to know that Canada was giving treaties to all these other First Nations in the prairies, for example, and they said, "Where's our treaty? Right? We want a treaty too. We need land. We need our land surveyed. People are coming in and taking over and preempting land that we live on." Mm-hmm. Anyways, they were trying to build a road from Butte Inlet and taking a shortcut up to the gold fields, but they didn't have permission to cross Tsilhqot'in territory. And anyways, the Chief Latossain was there, and there were some other things that happened, but in the end, they were people that were building the trail and surveying were killed in the act of war. And 2 years before that, there was the smallpox epidemic. Right. That probably decimated over 75% of our population. Jeez. And so one of the road builders threatened Tlatosain. He said, "We'll bring back smallpox." And he felt as a chief, that was an act of war.
Yeah.
And they just been through that, right? They're just recovering from, that epidemic. And that almost wiped out our people. And so they declared war, and that's why they attacked the road crew. And then they sent up the army or soldiers, and then there was battles throughout Chilcotin for the 1864. Jeez. And then finally, the chiefs got word that the BC government, or whatever they're called at the time, wanted to sit down and talk about a peace treaty. And so, the chief said, okay, that's all we've been looking for and wanting. And then they met up with them. I can't remember where, but they all got. So there was 6 chiefs, and they all got handcuffed and shackled.
Of course,
and
just a double cross. Yeah.
Speedy trial, and they were all hung. Well, 5 were hung in Quesnel, and 1 was hung a year later in New Westminster, Chief Ahan. But Chief Latsasain, last words before they put the bag over his head to hang him, he said, "We meant war, not murder."
Isn't that wild? I can't. Just the history, it's terrible. Like, just completely, just plain evil, right? Yeah. Just terrible.
Yeah. So so that's the story you were told when you were able to comprehend.
Wow.
And just keeping that alive, and mistrust of the government, mistrust of people in authority, right? Mistrust of the police, for generations.
Yep.
And then it wasn't until 2014 that we felt that we were right.
Right. Finally.
Acknowledged after 150 years.
Yeah. Like hard won, like the resilience of you guys to be able to push for that long, and to, you know what I mean? Like, we sit here and go, thank God, Canada, that's great. Good job, Canada, for figuring it out. And it's like, but it's been 150 years of murder and genocide and chaos. And we're like, Canada's doing good now. It's like, no, there's still quite a ways to go. There's a lot to reconcile for, and that's what this is all about. Yeah. No,
but
congratulations
kudos to, that was awesome. And then kudos to, after that, the Supreme Court decision, kind of laid out, okay, here's your area for the title land. Here's, the declared rights area outside of that. But, a big part of that decision was that, First Nations didn't own postage stamp properties, the rock that they stood on to catch fish. That's
where they're posted.
We own the huge areas, but anyways, they decided just on that smaller area because we had a better chance of winning. But not too long after that, we negotiating with the BC government. Premier Clark was in at the time, and so that's where we started our first year 5-year agreement with them, and then they actually pardoned our chiefs.
Oh wow!
And then we they also were pardoned in Ottawa at the federal government level. So that was huge,
These are the chiefs that were hung, or the chiefs that were.
The chiefs that were hung, so they were pardoned. And then that was the first step of reconciliation for our people.
At least they're recognizing that those were real events that happened, and it was.
And that was huge, the title win, the exoneration of our chiefs. Those, like I was referring to earlier, there's been some foundation laid, right?
Yeah, right.
Those are 2 major foundations that were laid, and then a larger agreement has been. I think they're up for renewal, but the pathway agreement, they call it, between the Tsilhqot'in Nation, the BC government, and the federal government. So the tripartite agreement that's really helping bring resources into our communities, building homes, for example. Or Tsilhqot'in people taking over jurisdiction of their children and families, for example, is another one. And Justin Trudeau,
Yeah, yeah.
the Prime Minister, actually came and celebrated with us on Tidal Land.
Oh, yeah.
And that was huge for our people.
Okay. That's
So
great.
their leader to come and to take out the territory and say sorry.
Yeah.
Right?
That's it. Just it shows
so
that
was
I'm serious.
huge.
We're not. This isn't just a. Yeah. I'm trying to actually reconcile. Actually, trying to begin.
Yeah.
And I liked you the word you chose as far as trying to paint the picture of where we're at with reconciliation in Canada, right? And you said the foundation is being built for reconciliation, and I like that because it does seem like.
There's a way to go for sure.
yeah. Like I think it's a lot of people might feel good. Go, no, we're doing good in Canada. We're reconciling now. And it's like, well, everybody needs to take a role. Everybody needs to be taking a step. And whether you're some random person working at a bank in downtown Toronto or you're an Indigenous person living in the bush, right? Like everybody, and I mean, obviously, Indigenous people have nothing to reconcile for, but Western society does, right? And
hey, we did nothing wrong.
Yeah, right. But everyone has a role to play to help make this possibility, right? And I think I want to talk about the momentum that CCR and your nations have started to create towards this reconciliation, and you've talked quite a few times about how this is given back to community, right? And how this whole organization is not just a for-profit organization looking to make money and do well for its stockholders, right? This is an organization that's owned by the community, run by several communities, and where everything's going back, and you're reinvesting, and it's creating jobs, and this is all about making sure everything's sustainable, the community and the nature and water and everything. Has there been a revitalization of culture, a revitalization of pride and prosperity, that kind of thing in your community as a result of this newfound capacity, I guess?
Yeah, I think in some ways it certainly contributes to that revitalization or strengthen, I guess would be a better word for me.
Right.
Of our culture. One quick example I can give you is, CCR manages forest licenses, right? These communities have benefited from, our hard work and bloggers and forestry crews and helping these community companies to generate their own source revenue.
Right.
A lot of revenue that the First Nations receive is from the federal government, right? And
right.
there's things attached to it, right?
Of course, yeah.
You got to spend it the right manner. It's a lot of programs are always underfunded. You always have to fight tooth and nail, to get proper funding for programs like education. This orange source revenue generated from our forestry programs I know for my community has allowed us to purchase a resort that on Puntu Lake, which is the nearby lake that we've always lived on, for generations, and where I kind of grew up in the summer.
Oh yeah.
And but over the years we lost access, to that lake. A lot of places were preempted and we were pished out, and we didn't really have our own access. I mean, they had a couple areas where we still practice our traditional fishing and things like that, but not a spot to call our own.
Right.
Spot on the lake. We do have one Indian reserve that was located on the north side of the lake, but it was an area that our past chiefs, were given to, and that's not what they wanted.
Right.
Even their own drawings from the Indian agents back then that said worthless land. That's what they gave us for a reserve. Their own maps said worthless land.
Jesus. Not very
no access
subtle,
to the lake, no farming land, no hay meadows. Anyways, so we were able to purchase, what was it called? It was called Kokanee Bay Resort, fishing resort. And we told them, if you ever decide to sell, look us up. So, and that's what happened. And we were able to purchase that resort. We renamed it to Benzie, which means Puntsy. And so it's a Benzie wellness resort. So, people are so overjoyed, especially the
Yeah.
elders,
Oh yeah.
who could name all the whose camping spot was around that lake.
Oh really?
Before we could all got pushed out of there,
Yeah, yeah.
and they were so happy. Is this ours? Is this ours?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So
That's
so now we had a safe place for children and families to come down, um, enjoy the lake, enjoy the shore, enjoy the beautiful scenery there, and practice their culture and carry out their traditions. And now they have programs there, mostly in the summer, but we're going to be working on a more long-term strategy around that. But, a safe place for people to go, no alcohol or drugs, and have, men's programs, ladies programs, family programs, you know, uh, kids programs, and just having a safe place to be able to carry that out. And, we're definitely expanding on it. We want to put, one of the best kids camp around,
oh yeah,
and,
nice.
and have other communities, whether they're First Nation or not, come stay at our kids camp for a week.
Oh, I love
That's
that.
the point we want to get to. So, yeah. So in that way, it definitely it has played a big part in terms of just working, in the background and making sure that these communities have forest licenses and cutting
Yeah.
permits ready to go, so they can benefit from those licenses, right?
Yeah.
And other areas is like where we've lost a lot of territory from these wildfires, and a lot of people still carry out traditions like berry picking and going
Sure.
out to get medicinal plants. So now this summer we're surveying, I think, 100 hectares to near our community, because we don't want the elders traveling too far, have it near our communities, and start engaging with the community and seeing, okay, what plants would you like to see growing, in these areas that have been burned. Is it supalali, because a lot of people like supalali, or Saskatoons, or, medicinal plants like juniper, for example, right?
Sure.
So, so people can have, the opportunities not to travel too far, but still carry out these berry picking activities. I mean, that's just one small, component of what we do, but generating our own source revenue has allowed us to have a successful diversification of business through our Site Level Development Corporation too. And, we're in the gravel business. We're in, all these other businesses, right?
Yeah.
And, the resort business, we got 2 resorts now.
Nice.
And one of them they're both on Punzi Lake, but one is, for community and guests, and the other one is still, we operate it as a open to the public. It's a fishing resort.
Oh, nice.
But we just acquired, I don't know, we haven't put a media release out yet, but we've acquired this huge area. It's a backcountry tenure lease, where we want to carry out ecotourism activities, and that will complement our Barney's Resort.
That's amazing.
It's over 250,000 hectares.
Nice.
And
that's incredible.
We want to protect and conserve and manage that area, for generations to come. And I think there's just a lot of possibilities there. So, we're not just going out, onto our land to, cut down trees and log. That's just a small part of our business.
Yeah.
But, also to get hold of these large tenures where we can, also think about conservancy of these large, beautiful areas. This area goes right into the coast mountains, clean river, cool. It's called, and it's just a beautiful area. And, and bring back cultural activities to so we got a lot of communities are because we're traditional horse people, right?
Okay. People
of the river. Tsaikot means people of the river, but we also were people of horses. You see horses in the background.
I do. Yep. Yeah.
And so a lot of these communities have horse riding programs. Those that don't own a horse and they're children, grandchildren can learn how to ride a horse, and so those kids are so excited,
Awesome.
about those programs, and they have little gymkhanas around Chilcote now, and they have a ride into Williams Lake. It's like a 10-day ride, things like that.
I love
And
that.
but this ecotourism area that we bought there, the riding program already rounded up a bunch of people. They're going to go cut, because it's a remote area. You can only fly in by float plane or ride a horse in. So they're all excited to have their kids, all the kids in their horse riding program, go in and be able to camp at the at the cabins there.
Incredible.
And so they started today. Actually, they're in there, chainsaws and cutting a trail that's wide enough for horsepack to go through. So they're all excited. So bringing back those types of activities are so much needed in our community, and the kids are benefiting from it, and keeping kids busy is a big job, right? So keep them busy, and they can stay off their phones, right? So you keep them active, and so that's something that they're going to do this summer once they clear out the trail, is bring a bunch of kids and a 20-kilometer ride in somewhere around there and camp, and just learn about the outdoors and continue to carry out their traditions.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of pride. A lot of pride is in the community as a result of what's been possible, right? And that's awesome to hear. I love that. Yeah. I really, really love that. Yeah, it's just huge to know that for a community that's of Indigenous people that have been through so much, that you can come out with a little ingenuity and creativity and I'm sure a lot of luck in getting things done the right way and having the right partners who are willing to collaborate and help and do whatever. I can't imagine, but it's awesome to see that it's such a template for what's possible, right?
Like, on the business side of things, I've been involved with Satellite Enterprise, I don't know how many years, but, I didn't go to school for, business administration or things like that.
You didn't get your BA.
But you learn from these people who are in that business.
Sure.
Right. And they've handed down their knowledge, for quite a few years, and that makes you a better decisions in their businesses and thinking strategically down the road, right? Some of them have passed on that knowledge to us, and then we need to pass it on to the next generations that are coming up behind us, right? Pass on that business knowledge, and so that's important component of our businesses is transferring that knowledge.
I think that's a huge point to make, is the community base of these organizations, right? Is that it's a great template for what's possible, because I think there's some pushback against how creative and how innovative you can be in forest management and still be profitable. But this is a perfect template of if profit's not your number one priority, what is possible? What you're capable of accomplishing with even the bottom of the barrel, as far as wood supply is allowed. So it's a great case study in, hey, this is how we can do forest management if we take a different approach. If we think about it a little bit differently, we just say, hey, how can forest management help the community? How can forest management help everything, right? And it's incredible to see, and I think you guys should be incredibly proud of what you've been able to accomplish, and it's I think it's inspiring for anybody to hear, right? Because it's with the little resources that you've been able to pull off so much, and it's fantastic. And
we're definitely not stopping here, but definitely. And a lot of our success, I think, is in building these good relationships with even our other First Nation neighbors, right? We Atletico government, for example, our partner in CCR.
Okay.
Before there was a clear line of, okay, this is your territory, this is our territory.
Okay.
And then now when one of their forestry trucks from Ditchen, their company, is parked at our store, I get a phone call. What's Ditchen doing in our territory?
Yeah.
And now that
call your friends, there's going to be a street fight. Yeah.
Yeah. And now that we've formed CCR, and we know that we can't just operate in our core territories, we've got to, join forces and not compete with one another. Tlatinco, they're good at civil culture. They've done civil culture for years, and they, know how to manage large crews. They're really good at, they've been running wildfire crews for I don't know how many years. They're really good at that.
Yeah.
Tidal Enterprise, well, we've been logging for a while, so we don't compete. So they, we send our civil culture and wildfire crews to them. Usually they're the same people, and then they look after them, and they send some of their equipment and some of the equipment operators our way. So we complement each other.
That's awesome.
And then I think that's the key, out remote areas, is we need to work together. We need to work with our First Nation neighbors and non-First Nation neighbors, and keep that work internally. And support our own communities first, and then obviously there's opportunities for other people, but and then now we're it was unheard of 5 years ago that we're working outside of our territory, Tlaixcotean territory, and doing work with Williams Lake First Nation, who is a different nation. There's the Northern Shuswap, or the Tlaixcotean, and building relationship with them, with our biomass pilot project in Percy Lake. There's other First Nation communities that we're working with, the High Bar First Nation and the Canham Lake Indian Band. So that's how I see that we're going to survive into the future, is building these very important strategic relationships. And along with the industry, along with the both levels of government, those relationships, they go a long ways for sure.
Yeah. So just recognizing you can't do this alone. You need collaborators, you need friends, you need people to do this with and work off of, which is true of society in general, right? So it's that's totally. So I want to finish things off with a bit of homework for people, or just kind of maybe not a call to action, but just for people that are listening that maybe professionals or people in industry or people in conservation or whatever. What can people walk away with this? Like, what kind of lessons do you think we can learn from this whole conversation that people can, take action to be a part of these types of solutions?
Yeah, I think start these relationships, whoever you work for, government or industry, and got the opportunity to work with First Nation communities or companies. I mean, you need to build that relationship early, and it has to be maintained. You know, don't be afraid to join these community functions when they're carrying out activities out on the land. I mean, it's not all business around the table, right? To get to know someone, go golfing with them, or go bang on a drum with them. It works both ways, right?
Totally.
So, but just build that relationship to start understanding, where that community is at, in terms of, their reconciliation, in terms of, learning about their capacity, learning about, what needs do they have, and then, learning about how they want to be involved in decision making or business opportunities. You just got to get to know them.
Yeah.
And we don't bite. And just, if you're someone from industry or government, give these communities equitable opportunities to be able to carry out these opportunities and make it meaningful for them,
Yeah.
and to help lift them up.
Totally.
Sometimes we need a hand,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of smaller communities that do need a hand
Mhm.
in terms of capacity, resources, right? Help them with training. There's some communities that have really shown us the way.
Mhm.
Tidal Enterprise, Tidal First Nation, how quickly these companies can grow,
Mhm.
and once this community gets engaged and start building that capacity, they bring on more opportunities, and they're growing there, but they always need assistance along the way.
Yeah.
You just can't give them opportunity, give them a forest license
Yeah.
like the government has,
Right.
and say, here you go, see you
Yeah.
later.
Yeah. Not everybody's
Good
got
luck.
the same skill
Good
set,
luck.
right?
Good luck.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
luck with that.
Yeah.
These smaller communities, they can't even afford to hire a forester.
Yeah.
Like so, and they don't know the ins and outs of implementing a forest license.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they're just not familiar in that sector.
Yeah.
That
There's
process.
a lot of policy and red tape and everything else that you got to get through. And
Exactly.
if you're not familiar with that business or that industry, then how could you possibly assume to make it through? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So just, they got to keep their ears open, their doors open,
Yeah.
and don't be afraid to knock on these communities' doors and, with opportunities. And, a lot of times, these communities are looked over, right? Well,
Right.
they can't handle it. We'll give it to this Joe Blow over here, give them that opportunity. Well, no, you've got to give them that first right of refusal.
Yeah.
And, it's just good business when you're operating in the First Nation community's territory before you even start planning to knock on their door. And we were seeing more and more of that.
Yeah.
Even with mineral exploration companies.
Oh, nice.
That have a different set of rules, right?
Right,
The
of course,
Mining
yeah.
Act.
Yeah, what's below our feet is different. Yeah.
So we have those folks knocking on our door before they even start planning, because planning is an important part of initiative process where you engage the community in the planning, and
Absolutely.
so you can have their buy-in, help with that planning process, and provide input and of their needs and their wants, and so it's very important to not just develop a plan in their area and say, here you go, you have 30 days to comment. Doesn't work like that anymore.
That's an interesting point, right? Like, not to just pass over the communities who maybe don't have the skill set yet and move to the one that does, but to actually recognize that, hey, when there's a community that doesn't have a skill set, that's an opportunity for you as an industry or whatever to create an ally, create somebody who can help you with that area and be a professionals in that area, and you can create a working relationship with, right? And
exactly,
absolutely,
and also supporting these communities, and a lot of these communities are still negotiating and trying to address land rights, right? So be respectful of that. And, these communities always, especially the smaller remote communities, they also require, revenue sharing agreements, right? So they can, build their own capacity, not just, but, a lot of cases, companies will come in and say, here's $5 a meter. See you later. It's got to be more than that. You've got to help, the community grow, and then in the end, I mean, you'll be all better for it. There's a lot of access to band members with different skills, right?
Totally.
More training and the communities don't go anywhere. So you have, a good pool of workers in, whatever industry, forestry is what we're talking about. But, you've got to grow that pool of resources.
Totally. Yeah. Relationships take work. Right. And I love that idea of just like, hey, take the first step, right? Why does the nation need to come to you? Why don't you go to them? Right? Why don't you try something new, start a conversation, and just see where it goes, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I love that.
I mean, I mean, talking and just, being respectful,
Yeah. Listen.
it goes a long ways, right? And listening and not just dropping off, a package and maybe some donuts and see you later,
Yeah.
It takes effort, and
Yeah.
it takes a while.
Yeah.
And but I guarantee that in the end it benefits everyone.
Totally. Trust and respect are earned, right? And
Exactly.
yeah, you have to try at those things. It takes time. That's awesome. Well, Percy, I really appreciate you being so open and really letting us see the inner workings of, your own history and the history of your community and the history of your people and what's been possible, what you've been able to accomplish. Cause it's very, very, it's beneficial for everybody. So thank you for your time.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. And I wish you nothing but the best, cause this was a fantastic conversation. I'm really happy with it.
Yeah, that didn't take too long, eh?
No.
I can keep going. I was worried.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know. I don't think I can talk for 2 hours, but
yeah, you nailed it. Yeah, that was awesome. Thanks, Percy.
Okay, great.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you were as moved by Percy's words as I was. I hope you learned what I learned. It's such a case study in what's possible and what we're able to accomplish if we step outside of what's traditionally done, how we normally do things, what we're used to, and allow ourselves to be creative, be innovative, and to just try new things, right? I love it. And it's just, there's so much possibility out there. And thanks to Percy, we know what some of those might be, right? So thanks a lot, Percy, for everything. If you have a question for Percy, for myself, shoot me an email, yourforestpodcast@gmail.com, and I'll get back to you. Thanks a lot for listening. Catch y'all next time. Take it easy.